Inkognito, like people call this game in Italy, or Incognito, like people would say in English-speaking countries. Incognito is an Italian game, and it is a game that I waited for some 30 years almost to play. I've done other stuff too. It's not I spent the last decades waiting to play this game. But I remember when this game originally came out in Italy in the late 80s. I remember there was a TV commercial for it and I was fascinated. It showed Venice or some stage or some set that kind of looked like Venice with the mist and these creepy domino masks going around and doing spy-ish stuff. Fascinating. I wanted to play it. I don't remember why I never got to play it and why I never got a copy. Probably something as simple as my parents thought it looked weird and didn't buy me one. I was young then. Incognito is a game of espionage thematically set in a generically past romanticized Venice in which the players represent agents. They have the little net of spies. They're trying in the chaos of the Venetian carnival to identify their partner, to exchange information with their partner. They don't know which of the other players is the partners. And once they know who the partner is, they're trying to accomplish a specific mission. The game is a 4-player game. There are variants that are for 5 and 3 players, but don't even think about it. This game is what it needs to be and what it's supposed to be at 4 players, which is always a little bit of minus when you do not have that flexibility. But if you can put together an event with 4 players that want to try it, then maybe this is a game that is worth a try. Or is it? Let me show how the game plays, what the general ideas and concepts behind the game are, and then maybe we'll talk about that, whether this is a game worth trying or not. This is the board of the game. It is a mounted board and frankly it looks gorgeous. It represents the city of Venice, clearly in a simplified fashion, but the colors, the art, even just that logo of the game there, just everything makes the board look really beautiful. And I find the other components of the game to be very attractive too, starting from the playing pieces. The playing pieces are these guys that you see there, which represent domino masks of the Venetian carnival, and actually each represents a spy, and these spies are going around and trying to have a look into each other's business. There's also a non-playing piece, a non-playing character, which is the ambassador, and starts the game in that space there. Each player chooses a color, and each player has 4 of these playing pieces of that color. As you can see, the color is the same, but the build is different. So you may have this guy here, we'll call him Andy. We have another guy, we'll call him Lance. Then we have a guy, we'll call him, I don't know, Joel. And then a guy that we'll call Marco. So everybody has this team of Marco, Joel, Lance, and Andy. And they are placed on the board in specific areas indicated by colored dots on the board. That represents your net of spies, but actually one of them is you. The other 3 were just people that work for you, but nobody in the game but you knows which one you are. So first you need to learn who you are, then you also need to know which of your figures you actually are. There are 4 characters in the game: Agent X, Madame Zaza, Lord Fiddlebottom, and Colonel Bubble. At the beginning of the game you shuffle these 4 cards and you give one face down to each player. That indicates the character that you are. Once you know who you are, you need to find your partner. The game ideally plays with 4 players so that you have 2 teams. Madame Zaza is always the partner of Agent X and vice versa, and Lord Fiddlebottom always works with Colonel Bubble. So once you know who you are, you also know who is it that you're looking for. But as I said, you also need to know which figure in your net you actually are. So there are these 4 cards indicating the 4 builds. Shuffle, 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 give one secretly to each player, and suppose that these are the cards that I received. Now I know that I am Madame Zaza, and I actually am this one. And the other green pieces I will still use exactly as mine, but it's not me, and that will affect certain things in the game. Also, there are 4 letter cards, A, B, C, D. You shuffle them and you give one to each player secret at the beginning of the game. The player looks at it at the beginning of the game. There isn't much that you do with it. However, the aim of the game is to try to figure out which one is your partner, then to figure out which letter card your partner has. So now you know your own, that of your partner, and you know how to win the game. Each player has a screen, nice color-coded screens, which you use to conceal the information. Don't put it on the board like I'm doing here. Put it by the board, please. To use information such as your cards, and also you will have a pad where you'll take notes during the game to try to detect who is everybody, which piece is which player is which character. But once you know who your partner is and you meet with the partner and you get to learn the letter card that they have, then you know how to win the game. Suppose that I am Agent Hex and I have an A card. Finally, I know that my friend, whoever that is Madame Zaza. I meet with Madame Zaza. Madame Zaza hands me their secret card. Now I know Madame Zaza has a B and I know that I have an A. By cross-referencing the correct line, I know what is the condition that I need to meet to win the game. If I have B and my partner has A, or vice versa, then we'll land any piece on the ambassador. With the same 2 letters, actually the other team has a different goal, which is to land any piece on Agent X. You may need to land a specific card on the ambassador. Land any piece, etc., etc. Moves Madame Zaza to space 4, to space 2, Agent X to space 2. Some spaces are numbered on the board precisely because they're referenced in the objectives. So I think it's really cool that each game will have different objectives, different victory conditions, and you do not even know what your victory condition is at the beginning of the game. You only know your half of the code. At the beginning of your turn, you grab this strange-looking fellow here, the Phantom of Prophecy, and you give it a good shake. There are marbles inside, and you're trying to shake them so that you randomize the ones that will actually show in these 3 holes here. 2 black and a white. Or it could have been white, orange, and purple. It's a very noisy prop. Do not play the game when your little darlings are sleeping next to you, because that's not going to end well. Now, once you have your colors there, you're going to use them to move pieces on the board. And you can use each color, each marble, multiple times on the same figure. For each orange color or orange marble that you have, you can move one of your pieces, suppose I am green, on a land orange connection to the next point in the movement net. If I had a light blue one, I would have been able to move one of my pieces on a water connection, which are these ones, and that will allow you to sometimes reach areas on the other side of the Venetian canal, so like from there to there. If you get a white color, then you can move one of your own pieces by a land or water connection. If you have a black result, you can move the ambassador by any one connection, land or water. And if you have the purple result, you may move another player's piece, another player's guy, by any one connection, water or land. What you're trying to do is to land on other player's pieces, or to bring them to you. When you get to another player's piece, then you can ask them a question. The only 2 questions you can ask: build or identity. You can phrase it differently, but that's what you're trying. Those are the only 2 options. Each player has 4 identity cards with the 4 characters in the game, and 4 build cards with the 4 possible builds. As you can see, these are color coded. These are the 8 cards that blue player has. Green has the same set. Green has met blue and can ask about build or identity. If green has asked about identity, then the blue player chooses 2 identity cards and a build card, and secretly shows them to the other player, and at least one of these cards has to be true. One of them has to be the true identity, or this has to be the real build. The other question you may ask is about the build, in which case the question the player will show 2 builds and 1 identity. Again, at least one of which needs to be the real one. You then will record on your sheet here which player gave you what information, what set of things you saw. Then by comparing the results, you start having a good idea of who is who, and that's when you know, or you get a good chance of knowing who your partner is. The ambassador is a very powerful piece. You want to land on it as often as possible and keep it away from other players as much as possible. Because when you meet the ambassador, you can ask any player about their build or their identity. If you ask about the identity, they have to show you only two identity cards. One of them must be true. If you ask them about the build, they have to show you 2 build cards. One of them needs to be the real one. If you are meeting the ambassador anywhere on the board, then you send it back to the embassy, unless the embassy is occupied, in which case the ambassador can go anywhere, in any unnumbered space on the board. There's also this thing that once you question another player, then after the question is answered, you remove the player and you place that piece in any unnumbered, unoccupied space on the board. When you encounter another player, you can also choose, instead of questioning the player, to get an extra move, which early on in the game is not that useful, but possibly later on, when you know what your objective is, maybe you'll need to move fast towards a location. In that case, it may be a good idea to get the extra move instead of questioning the player. So another important thing is that when you're showing cards, you also need to keep track of the cards that you show to each player, at least to try to remember those, because you're not allowed to show the same set of cards to an opponent twice. If you ask me about identity and I showed you these cards, then later we meet again and you ask me about identity and I show the same 3 cards. Oopsie doopsie. You can show me that after I showed you these 3 cards already. You can demonstrate that. That's embarrassing. What's happening is that I broke that rule as a penalty. Now I have to show you only 2 cards, one of which needs to be the real one. If you make a mistake like that with the ambassador, like you show the same 2 cards that you showed before, again you have the penalty of showing -1 that it would be necessary. So now the penalty is that you have to show the 1 card, which has to be the real one. I say ouch because sometimes, of course, it's very painful unless you're lucky and then you're forced to reveal your identity precisely to your partner. That's going to be great use. But what happens when you know who your partner is? Then the game says that you can use body language, produce a specific gesture to identify yourself. I don't like that at all. It feels gamey, it feels silly, it feels too childish. There's a much better and interesting way, if you're pretty much sure who your partner is, to let them know that, which is to show them some of your real cards. Maybe, you're just showing them. When they ask about your identity, what you stick in there is your actual identity. They see the gray card, they know that's actually you. Like, oh, look at that, that's my partner. Oh, great. Or like, oh, that's silly because that's not my partner, but he's showing me this. When you're showing cards to your partner, I'm pretty sure at some point you will want to sneak in your mission card, because ultimately, in order to win the game, you need to exchange that information. You and your partner need to know each other's clue. So again, you will need to meet and be questioned by your partner, and that's when you give them the relevant information, who you are and or what piece of the code you have. Once a team or a player in the team knows about the code, then the player needs to accomplish that mission. And once the player accomplishes that mission, remember the 2 partners haven't talked about the mission at all. At that point, the player that actually made it, actually performed the action, that completes the mission, stands up, extends a friendly, victorious hands towards the partner shakes it, and they high five, they cheer, whoo, hooray, they perform a little dance like this, crazy stuff, make it look as funny and as incredible and as over the top as possible. Because it may be that you're wrong, that the partner looks at you like, what? Well, the person you thought was the partner, so what? Maybe that's not your partner. If you make a mistake like that, you thought you had completed the mission and you did not identify your partner correctly, that's too bad for you. Then automatically you give victory to the opposing team, which means when you declare victory, make sure you probably have it, because that will end the game either way, with your victory if you're correct or your defeat if you are not. Which is why I said, when you are congratulating your partner for the great victory, make it look crazy and silly and speak loudly and everything, because then if you are mistaken, it's funnier and everybody has a good laugh. Okay, I didn't know much about the game, if not what I remember from the commercial in the past decades, and after reading the rules, I got to tell, I was a little lukewarm about the game. I was like, what? I've been waiting since 1988 for this? Move and look at 2 cards or 3 cards and something like that. It felt a little meh, or it looked like it would be a little blah, 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 blah. Oh boy, was I mistaken. I sure was, because I definitely enjoyed this game, and the 3 people I played it with really enjoyed it too. So much so that after playing the game, we immediately wanted to play another game, and we already have arranged the next meeting in which it will be the 4 of us and we'll play it again. We already scheduled the next event in which we want to play Inkognito, because it is such a fun game. It is a deduction game without being a brain burner, without being something that makes you sweat, gives you a headache. Interestingly enough, the same night that we played Inkognito earlier, we gave a try to a puzzle type of game called Ricochet Rabbits. I felt miserable after 10 minutes of playing that game. Inkognito has a deduction aspect, but it is much more manageable. It is much more approachable. It also has a spatial aspect. It has a board, which is not an indifferent thing. It's like a mastermind that happens in a vacuum. The physical, the spatial aspect is extremely important, because you need to meet with the people that you want to meet, and you need to set up situations that will lead you to complete your mission. Once you get a sense who is not your partner, then I'm trying to be annoying to them and to try to disrupt their plans, or whatever they may be. You're trying to get the ambassador close to you and far from the opponents. There are a lot of things that do happen on the map in Venice which are relevant, and I like that. It really feels like it's a board game where the board matters, with that deduction aspect, which looks, if you're looking at people playing the game, it may look a little boring from the outsider's perspective, because there isn't much conversation going on. People don't talk much, and people stare at their cards and their screens and their notes a lot. But that doesn't mean that there is downtime. From the subjective perspective of the player, actually there is always something that you're doing, because it's your turn, then you figure out how to move, and you figure out what questions you want to ask. If you're being asked questions, then you're still trying to figure out, what card should I give? Is that gonna be my partner? Then I want to make it easy for the partner to identify me. I don't think that's gonna be my partner. I'm gonna be tricky and devious. I'm gonna try to hide my identity from that player. If you're not the active player, if you're not the questioned player, then you can look at your notes and you can try to study them and make sure that you didn't make mistakes. You can look at the board and try to figure out your next move. A lot of things that you can do, and actually, even though I would say the game wasn't all that fast going around, I felt like there was always something I was doing, and I felt involved. I was, without doing any strange body language like the moves that the rules suggest. I was still exchanging meaningful glances with my partner once I figure out who that partner was. Yes, there is that option that you start moving and doing strange stuff with your hands and your face, and the opponent is supposed to identify that. But of course, if the other people see you doing that, you look silly at first. And all of the deduction aspect, all the trickiness is all for naught. So I really have no intention of playing with that version. I haven't really even dignified it with a full explanation in my review, but who cares? You can play without it, you should play without it. Without it, the game plays very well. I got to tell you, I was surprised. I thought the game was gonna be dry, was gonna be slow, but it was fun as it happened, and I told you there wasn't much conversation going on, but as soon as the game is over, people can't stop talking because they're saying, that's what I really did, that's what I really meant, when you did that, I wanted to do that, blah, 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 blah. There was a lot of fun conversation. We almost replayed the game, discussing it and laughing about the things that could have happened, the times in which a side almost handed victory to the other team without having any idea that they were doing so. So you can imagine that team was like, oh, come on, do that thing. Oh, they're not doing it. Fun. To me, the aesthetic appearance of a game is the last thing that I take into account when assessing the quality of a game. To me, a game needs to play well, the components need to be functional. The game plays well, the components are functional. If it's also beautiful, then that's a plus. And this game has to be one of the prettiest games in my collection. I love the board, I love how the little domino figures look. I simply love the organic flow that and the visual that these figures create as they move around the board, as they jump from one side of Venice to the other. It's beautiful and visually appealing. High quality of components. I guess also they had some 30 years to probably tweak and twist things around, so this is a product that has been tested a lot by playtesters and by generations of gamers. Inkognito is a simple game of deduction, not social deduction, pretty abstract deduction, but the board makes it such that the game doesn't feel too abstract and too dry. It has enough to give you the sense that it is indeed an intellectual challenge, not to the point of diverting you too much from the board experience or to make you too much lost into your thoughts and not able to interact. Because deducting things while also bluffing and while also taking care of the situation, the physical location of your pieces on the board is important. Several things going on. Overall, a light game that you can play in less than a game night. You can probably play multiple games in a single game night. Inkognito, whoa, it took me a long time to play this game since the first time I saw the commercial for it, and I felt the desire to play the game. It took me a while, but I'm happy I played it. I think this game is gonna see time on the table, more than I expected for sure, and actually, I'll be honest, I can't wait for the next time in which I'll put it on the table, set it up, look at the beautiful visual that the board gives me, and of course, when I'll play the game. So I really can't wait to play Inkognito again. Fun game.